Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the fourth short story that I've reviewed in this collection called The Unreal and the Real by Ursula K. LeGuin. It's about 40 pages long. I read it last night and about an hour and 15 minutes long. It's called Brothers and Sisters, but it's actually the first short story here in the collection for you folks. But I started with The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas, since that's the reason why I bought this book, the Hugo Award-winning short story, and then I've gone back and done a couple of shorter ones when I had not a whole lot of time to do a deep dive into this, and then this one was much longer because the 40 pages long. This collection is giant, right? And so I wanted to do it on a day in which I had some time to do a deep dive rather than my normal sort of maybe 45 or 50 minutes or an hour sometimes to do my during the weekdays to do my reading, right? So I wanted to have a full day, so I did it on Saturday last night and knocked it out for the first time. And again, it was about an hour and 15 minutes for me to knock out Brothers and Sisters. Now, the first short story in this collection actually isn't in the fantasy, horror, or science fiction genres, folks, which Ursula K. Guin is definitely well known for, particularly her influences in science fiction and in fantasy. But we'll be doing a review of it anyway because she's so influential, right? And I've done it in a couple occasions. For example, Robert E. Howard, one of the most influential people of all time, created Conan the Barbarian in fantasy. He also wrote some horror stuff in the Cthulhu mythos and the occasional science fiction thing too. He also was an amateur boxer, so he wrote a bunch of boxing short stories for you folks. Actually, he wrote more boxing short stories than Conan short stories. So I knocked out a few of his boxing short stories, and nobody said, "Oh, hey, why are you reviewing that boxing short story?" Right? Because of that. Because it's not in your three genres, right? Similarly, he has a short story in a collection called The Blue Sword of Vengeance by a big character that I did a review of all the short stories. It doesn't have any fantasy elements in it too. But yet still I reviewed it. Again, nobody pushed back. Mary Shelley, one of the biggest names in horror, with her not one of her best beloved novels in the genre, The Haunting of Hill House, which has influenced a few movies, as well as her classic, iconic, canonical short story, The Lottery, which I read when I was a kid in my literature book for class, and has been as an iconic writer. And I picked up a collection of her short stories that were published in Penguin Classics and read them for you folks for this channel, and did a deep dive with her. But some of those short stories weren't horror, or the other two genres that I covered. But again, nobody pushed back and said, "Why are you doing this? Mary Shelley, such an iconic horror writer." Similarly, Stephen King has done some things outside of his horror that aren't that he's known for. So I don't believe anybody would push back if I did a Stephen King novel that was in a non-horror genre, right? So I'm still doing my review of this short story. It's about 40 pages long. Again, it took me a while for me to knock it out last night on Saturday night for you folks. So let's go ahead and start the review. Again, I keep my review spoiler-free, so I won't be doing a deep dive into what happens in the in the characters and so forth. But we're basically set in an older school quarry mine, and then they're quarrying stone. There's also some farms around that are subsistence and help out the miners too. So it's kind of a farming and a mining area for stone quarries. And that's basically the key elements of this small little town that has a handful of people in it that all basically have been living here their entire lives and were born here and will die here, and so forth. And so we're following along with two main characters. The first main character is a brother to another character, which is where the title of the Brothers and Sisters comes from. And he also has a sister too that they share. We're going to find out at the very beginning of this short story that our main character's point of view characters. The second, his older brother just pushed himself in front of an avalanche that was coming down into the quarry, and pushed aside another miner in order to save him. And now he's in the medical area and not looking too well. And so forth, but it looks like he'll be able to survive. But the question is, how long will it be? Will he be able to walk? Those sorts of things are happening in this frontier town. So that's what's happened, and that has our two main brothers, who also have a younger sister, is also a key character too, and then they also will have friends with a brother and a sister from another couple that are introduced in another section later on that will also become key characters. So there are basically 5 characters here: a brother and sister of another group, and then these two brothers and sisters, which is where the title Brothers and Sisters comes from. So Again, I won't give you spoilers free. It's not the most epic use of, I think, a 40-page short story, which took me more than an hour for me to read. It doesn't have this great epic ending. Well, it's interesting. It's not this hugely, striking or stirring revelation, right? Or anything that happens. It doesn't have this epic feel, right? It's just a short story. So I'm not giving it, so I don't feel like it really used its length well in terms of the concept of the story or the ending of the story. Although I did like the fact, the details, I like the writing, and so forth. So I like the detailed aspect of it, but there's a lot of conversation and a lot of description, and a lot of plot too, to be fair. But I just don't feel like at the end of the day it really lived up to the length of this short story, longer than an hour for me to read, right? So I'm going to be giving this probably more like a 7 out of 10, rather than something bigger for somebody who's won a lot of Hugos. But there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Now, again, I talked about how influential she was, so let's talk about that a little bit more. First of all, before I did a deep dive into this short story collection, I had done 2 novels reviews for you folks. The first was The Left Hand of Darkness, which is often seen by her fans to be one of her best works, and a signature canonical work in science fiction, one of her better novels out there. So I read that about 5 or 6 years ago before I started this channel, and so I did a review of this. Then I read a novel of hers that was on my bucket list called The Lathe of Heaven that I read a couple of years ago for this channel that I really, really enjoyed. And if you recall, it was one of my favorite novels that I read that year in my end of the year. My favorite novels that I've read this year, all of which were old, none of which are modern. Again, the name of this channel, The Worst Thing About New Books, is a quote by Jacques Joubert, a French philosopher, who said that the worst thing about new books was that they kept us from reading the old ones. And so here's somebody who wrote, before a lot of her key stuff before I was born in 1976, right, decades ago. So I think that's a key part of where I get the passion of this channel from, right? So I also talked about her influence in fantasy too. So let's talk about a little bit more about that. For example, she created the concept of the high wizard student training at a wizard school for the first time, learning about his magical powers and so forth. And he's got a lot of them. He's from a rural area, or an area where he didn't know about his powers. And he's now going through wizard school, and all the tropes of wizard school and so forth. It's in an Earthsay series. It starts with the novel A Wizard of Earthsay, and it's a 6-book series, and it was meant for more young adults and so forth. And it's definitely a huge part, because that's where the wizard school idea from Harry Potter, from J.K. Rowling, and other wizard school ideas that have come are living today. They're all living in that. That was created, but I don't really feel that Ursula K. LeGuin gets the appreciation that she should. I don't remember an interview by J.K. Rowling where she said, "Yeah, I got this idea. I read it when I was a kid. The Wizard of Earthsay and the rest of the series, loved it. That's where I got the idea from." Or later on, or just saying, "Yeah, I heard of it, but I didn't read it myself. But yeah, I heard of it, and that's where I got my idea from." Right? She doesn't say any of that. I don't ever recall that, right, ever happening, that was a thing. So I think that Ursula K. Le Guin is heavily influential on modern fantasy through her Wizard of Earthsay series, but just doesn't get the credit that she should. So that's also a key part of her influence in modern fantasy. So there you are. I'll go ahead and leave you to it. Have you read Brothers and Sisters by Ursula K. Le Guin? Would you agree or disagree with my rating? If so, let's talk about it in the comments below. If you want to talk about the endings or the spoilers, let's do that in the comments below too. If you enjoyed this, let's talk about hitting that subscribe button, and because there's going to be a lot more of these to follow. And then finally, I just want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it and watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, and we're pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me is incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.